One of my favourite programmes on TV is Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing. Two comedian friends, Bob Mortimer and Paul Whitehouse, both had cardiac problems, and to help Bob overcome the trauma of his surgery, Paul invited him to join him on a fishing trip. As well as relating to some of the cardiac related conversations, I love the banter between the two friends and the gentle pace of the programme, which matches the patience needed when fishing. It's a relaxing programme to watch. Contrast that with the account at the end of John's Gospel in chapter 21, where Peter and his disciple buddies had gone fishing back on his home territory, the Sea of Galilee. They'd been out in their boat all night, repeatedly casting the nets and consistently catching nothing. As the morning dawned, they headed back to the shore, tired, dispirited, cold, and hungry. Can you imagine being on that boat? How are you feeling about it? Then, a stranger on the shoreline asked them whether they'd caught anything. John enigmatically and perhaps diplomatically says that they answered no. I suspect they may have said more than that, but even if that's all they said, the word was probably spoken with a lot of feeling. The stranger tells them to try again. He tells them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. And remarkably, despite the wasted night and exhaustion and burying any sense of indignation at someone else telling them what to do, they did it. Perhaps they remembered the earlier occasion when someone had suggested they try again after a fruitless night of fishing. It took some courage for them to decide to listen to the suggestion and to try one more time on the right side of the boat, when all they probably wanted to do was to reach the shore, go home, warm up and dry out. As we know, just like the earlier occasion, when they tried to pull the net back in, it was heaving with fish. This time there were too many to bring on board the boat. There's so much more that happens after this in John's narrative, but I want to stop here and reflect. Why had Peter and co gone fishing? John tells us that resurrected Jesus had already appeared to them twice before, so why were they in Galilee? Why were they fishing for fish rather than for people? The answer to the first question is found in what the angel told the women, as Mark records in chapter 16, verse 7, that Jesus was going ahead of them to Galilee. I suspect the answer to the second is that for Peter, Andrew, James, and John at least, this was something comfortingly familiar. Everything else that had been going on was so far beyond their experience that perhaps they needed the security blanket of a night's fishing to help them work it all out. And now for us, there's this prospect of the lockdown easing, and I wonder how we feel about that. It may be that after the pandemic, the lockdowns, the restrictions, many of us are feeling like those disciples, tired and dispirited, fed up, maybe almost ready to give up. While many churches have managed to use video conferencing, social media, phones, some have even produced paper newsletters to keep in touch and to try and carry on with the ministry to which Jesus has called us, it's just not the same, is it? It's inadequate. And even when we've been able to be in the same building for services, we've had to remain socially distanced, wear masks, refrain from singing and not talk with one another. And that just doesn't scratch where we're itching. Maybe we just want to go back to the way things used to be, to resume the comfortingly familiar, to feel the security blanket of doing what we've always done before wrapped around us. I understand that. But as John pointed out to Peter, it's the Lord who's asking us to try again, to cast our nets on the right side of the boat. Is he asking us to do things differently, to listen to him afresh and discover new aspects of ministry and mission in which he wants us to engage? For each church, and probably for each believer, exactly what cast your net on the right side of the boat means will be different. There may be some answers in the discerning process we went through as an association during lockdown 1. From those sessions, we discerned several key themes we felt God was reminding us about. Discipleship is more than programs. Discipleship is relational. Discipleship happens where God places us. Discipleship in lockdown makes new connections. And discipleship means still listening to God and going deeper with God. You can read about these themes in more detail on the EBA website. I wonder too whether casting our nets on the right side of the boat may also mean fishing where the fish are. What I mean is that we're called to minister in the name of Jesus to our communities, and right now, perhaps for the foreseeable future, two of the greatest needs will be around economics and well-being. Debt, unemployment, job insecurity, food poverty, and so many other financial issues have been aggravated significantly by the pandemic and the lockdowns. In what fresh ways might Jesus want your church to help people with this? And the emotional and mental health of our nation has taken a pounding from the pandemic. People have been forced into isolation. Human contact has been minimal. People have been separated from those they love, and there's a collective and individual sense of bereavement and loss in our country. In what new ways might Jesus be asking you to minister in this context? Now, I accept I've asked a few questions and given relatively few answers. The reason for that is that I do believe each church locally will need to discern what cast your nets on the right side of the boat means for you. It will be different for each of you because you have different resources available that God has given you. Time, people, money, different skills to offer, different context in which you minister. But maybe the image of being asked to cast your net on the right side of the boat would be a helpful way to begin that discernment process together. May the Lord bless you abundantly, and through you, bless those around you immensely.